thank you for the privilege to be here. How do you speak after an astronaut? So it's really tough to top that one, but I'm going to try my best. My topic that I want to speak about today is I call it the business of sobriety. And I want to speak a little bit about the world of de-alkalized wine and how that is changing. So just a little bit, as you know, my name is Chris, and I work in Stellenbosch University, which is a university about 30 minutes drive from Cape Town in South Africa. This is just a picture of our main campus. And to show you on this side, we actually have a building where we train our viticulturists and our winemakers. So we train winemakers on the campus. Um, and one of the reasons for that is we are situated in one of the largest wine producing areas in South Africa. So around Stellenbosch University, we have a lot of vineyards where we produce a lot of wine. And therefore, it's a passion for me to teach students but also be involved in wine consumption and wine marketing. So sometimes you will see me with a glass of wine in my hand, but then I argue I'm actually doing research while drinking my glass of wine. So what happens in terms of wine production? South Africa is currently the 8th largest producer of wine in the world. So we produce about 8.8 million hectoliters of wine, currently about 10 million hectoliters. And we are considered a new world wine producing country, together with countries like Australia and Chile. You will see the old world wine countries like Italy and France and Spain produce much more wine than we do, but luckily we are still there. So we produce about 10 million hectoliters of wine per year. A hectoliter is 100 liters of wine. So what do we know? We know that wine is a really complex product. And that's one of the reasons why I'm intrigued by wine, because we've been drinking it for thousands of years. Not we, a lot of people, but wine is really complex. Firstly, we have different cultivars. So you have Cabernet Sauvignon, you have Chenin Blanc, you have Chardonnay, you have Syrah. So we have different wine varietals that we use to make wine. Then we have different vintages. So every year we harvest the grapes. So we pick the grapes. So if you drink a bottle of wine and it says 2021, it means most of the grapes inside that bottle was harvested in 2021. Now, every year the vintage changes because some years are very dry, some are very sunny, and then we have a storm. And all of those elements influence the grapes that we use to make the wine. So therefore, once again, wine is a complex product. Then the vines or the plants live in what we call terroir. So terroir is the soil and the climate and things like that. Different terroirs influence the taste of the wine. Then we can blend different wines. Then we have different wine brands and we have different wine producers. And even wine can be inconsistent, although it's the same wine. So if I buy a bottle of 2017 Cabernet Sauvignon and I open the bottle of wine and I close it again and I drink it later, the taste might change because sometimes the wine oxidizes. Or it depends when I drink it. Is it a sunny, hot day or is it a cool day? Or it depends how I've matured the wine. Some people mature it in the correct way and other people's not. So if I would be selling a fizzy drink, I would know that all fizzy drinks taste the same. So if I sell a can of Coca-Cola, if I buy one now in India and I buy one tomorrow in India, it's going to taste the same. It's consistent. Wine is not consistent. It changes all the time. It's really complex. And that's one of the reasons why I really like this product. But also consumer behavior is also um, intricate. So when consumers go and buy a bottle of wine, there's a lot of decisions that they need to make. So many factors influence their decision. I'm going to simplify it a little bit. I'm really trying to concentrate to stay on the red carpet. I'm going to simplify it a little bit, and I'm going to tell you that consumers, when they select a bottle of wine, look at two major things. As I say, there are many others, but I want to show you today the two major ones. So the first one is what we call intrinsic attributes. So intrinsics is everything that has to do with a physical wine product. So that would be the color of the wine, or it would be the taste of the wine, or it would be the smell of the wine, or it would be the alcohol content of the wine. So different wines have different colors and smells and tastes. So consumers look at wine and they use their senses to evaluate it. Little information. Some people wonder why some wines are red and some are rosé and some are white. So when you crush the wine grape, the liquid that comes out is clear, it's transparent, it looks like water, it's yellowish. So how do we get red wine? We don't put red coloring inside, and there's a whole chemical process. But what we do is we take the juice from the grapes and we let it sit on the skin of the grape and the seed and all of those. Then the red from the seed goes into the liquid, colors the wine, and it becomes red. So how do we get rosé? If we do a rosé, we keep the skin of the grape for a very limited time on the juice, and then it becomes pink. So once again, you have different shades of pink for rosé as well. So once again, more complicated. We also get things on the outside. So when the consumer goes and buys wine, they look at the bottle, they look at the front label, they look at the back label, they look at whether it's won a reward or not, they look at the price. So once again, as I said, wine is a really complex product. And we've been drinking wine, not we, a lot of people, for thousands of years. So we know this. But what we also know is wine consumption is changing. So at the moment, wine consumption is the lowest since 1961. So you will see we were doing quite well in 2008, and then we had a rapid decline all the way down to 2023. And we are wondering, why is this happening? So if I'm a marketer and I want to sell things, I need to know, why is it happening? So as I told you, consumer behavior is intricate, and consumers go through phases in their consumption habits. And I'm going to show you a few examples of why people are drinking less wine. So the first reason is people do not want to consume that high levels of alcohol than they did before. People are trying to reduce their alcohol consumption for various reasons, but they say we want to drink wine in moderation. So what people now do is they tend to consume wine per occasion. So they would say, I will have wine on a Sunday afternoon with my lunch, or I will have wine while I'm watching one glass of wine while I'm watching a cricket game, and then I'm going to have cool drinks or something like that. So people are saying we want to reduce alcohol consumption. That includes alcohol that is involved with wine as well. Many consumers, especially young people, I see a lot of students here, you are worried about your health. So you eat healthy, you exercise, you train so that you can have a perfect body to put on social media. And you say, I'm worried about wine. Will it give me cancer? Will it damage my liver? I don't want to do that thing anymore. So I will reduce my wine intake, my alcoholic wine intake. And you also see on digital media, so influencers post things and they say, drink less alcohol, exercise more, rather drink water. So a lot of us are influenced by what people are saying on social media. And then we react and we say, maybe I should buy a little bit less alcoholic wine. And this whole thing, we call the sober curious movement, which means people are saying, we don't want to drink that much alcohol anymore. We don't want to get drunk and embarrass ourselves. We don't want to get a hangover. Why must I wake up the next morning and I've got a headache? Was it really worth it? People are saying, I want to drink and drive. If I drink alcohol, I cannot drive, but I want to drink something like alcohol and still drive. Or people say, I'm pregnant. I really want to have a glass of wine. I cannot because I might harm my baby. So, because of all these things, there is a movement that we're currently seeing from drinking alcoholic wine to non alcoholic wine. And the secret here is that you need to understand is people are not drinking less wine and drinking more soft drinks. People are saying, I want to drink something that looks like wine. If I go to a function or a dinner, I want to drink something from a wine glass. I want to have it in a bottle. It must look like wine, but it must just be wine without alcohol. And therefore, we are moving into the world of non alcoholic or de alkalized wine. I can show you some statistics. So, the market for non alcoholic wine at the moment is about 2.4, 2.5 billion US dollars. It's probably going to increased to about $5 billion at a compound annual growth rate of about 10% from this year to 2033. So we see that people are going to buy a lot of non-alcoholic wines in future. So what is the industry doing? It must take action, and it actually does. So I want to show you what the wine industry is doing at the moment. They say we are now going to offer non-alcoholic or de-alcoholized wines to consumers, but now it becomes a little bit more complex again. So wine is always complex. So if we look at classifications, these are by the International Organization of Wine and Wine. If a grape drink or a grape beverage contains alcohol that's more than 8.5% per volume, we call it wine. So it means if 8.5% of a wine bottle's contents is alcohol, we can call it wine. If the alcohol content is between 4.5% and 8.5%, then we call it reduced alcohol wine. If it is between 0.5 and 4.5, we call it low alcohol wine. And if it's between 0.05 and 0.5%, we call it de-alcoholized wine. So once again, even though you think you are drinking a de-alcoholized wine, there's always a little bit of alcohol inside. There's never no alcohol inside because it's really difficult to take all the alcohol out. So have a look at the small print on the bottle when you read it. So what do we do? I told you already that when we speak of wine, we look at intrinsics and extrinsics. If we look at the intrinsics, an important factor is taste. So we know that taste is important, but what happens, and this is another secret I want to tell you, when we make de-alcoholized wine, I have to make real wine first. So first what happens is I make a real wine with alcohol above 8.5%. Then I put the alcohol through a process to take the alcohol or the ethanol out of the wine, and then I have a de-alcoholized wine. And there are various techniques that we can use. One technique that's used a lot is what they call the spinning cone column. So what happens here, really complex, I'm not going to go into detail, but we put real wine in a tank, it goes through our process, they heat it up, there's membranes and all of that. The ethanol is taken out, the alcohol is taken out, and in the end, we finish with a de-alcoholized wine. So you must remember that de-alcoholized wine used to be a wine, and now it's not a wine anymore because the alcohol went out. Okay, but something happens when we take the alcohol out of the product. So I've got a quote by Decanter. I got this on Decanter. They say, alcohol is a big part of a standard bottle of wine. It transforms flavor and provides mouthfeel. What is mouthfeel? If I drink a drink like wine, if I swirl it around in my mouth, I feel something inside my mouth. And if I drink de-alcoholized wine, something different changes. So what happens if you drink sparkling wine, for example? Sparkling wine has got a lot of bubbles inside. And we say for sparkling wine, it feels like mousse in your mouth. So you've got a nice mouth feel. If I take the alcohol out of wine, the mouth feel changes. So they also say it changes the drink a lot. Some flavors get lost and others become concentrated. So what tends to happen, the acidity increases with de-alcoholized wine. So it becomes a little bit more sour, and also it tastes a little bit watery. So people are saying that drink wine, they say, don't really like de-alcoholized wine because it tastes sour and it tastes a little bit watery as well. So we now know something. We know that people want to consume a de-alcoholized wine. We also know that we are giving de-alcoholized wine to people. So the industry is making it. But because I'm a marketer, I need to know, what do consumers really want? What are the things that they prefer? So we started doing research on this. And I'm going to tell you about one study that we did. So I had a master's student called Marcus Filter, and Marcus conducted a study where he looked in 2 phases at many things. But one of the aspects Marcus looked at is, he said, of all the intrinsic and extrinsic attributes that we have, what would be the 13 most important attributes that people would want if they buy a bottle of wine? So he read a lot of journals, and he held a focus group. He spoke to a lot of South African consumers, and Marcus identified 13 attributes that we then um, compiled into a structured questionnaire, and we sent that to a sample of um, non-alcoholic millennial South African consumers, just over 600 of the consumers. The attributes that Marcus identified were these 13 tastes, matches my food, price, promotion, things like this. And very quickly, how it worked is in the questionnaire that we sent to people, we used what we call the best worst scaling technique. So, what you do is you make different choice sets. So, one choice set will have 4 attributes: taste, matches my food, price, and promotion. Then you ask the respondent, of the 4 attributes, tell me the most important one and the least important one. So, which one of the 4 is most important, which is least important? Then I shuffle all the attributes again. And now I say, I've tried it before, back label, someone recommended it, health value. Of these ones, what is the most important and what is the least important? Then we do a very big mathematical calculation, and then we have a result like this. I hope your eyes are good so that you can see. So after doing a lot of calculations, we didn't ask consumers rank from 1 to 13 what's most important. We looked at the relative importance. We found that taste was the most important attribute for non-alcoholic wine drinkers in South Africa. Second was price, then I've tried it before, and health value was number 5. What worried me as a marketer was that consumers didn't seem to worry about the marketing stuff. They didn't care about the back label. They didn't care about the attractive front label. They didn't care about the brand name. They didn't care about promotion. All the marketing stuff that I'm trying to teach people, they say we don't care as long as the wine tastes good. What we also did was here at the far on my left hand side, we calculated the probabilistic ratio scale, which means if taste is the most important, if I look at the second one, which is price, it shows me that taste was 4 times more important than price. And taste was 20 times more important than the back label and 10 times more important than the front label. So what this tells me is you cannot just make a wine that tastes bad and put it in a very nice bottle, because the consumer is going to say it's not about the bottle, it's about what's inside. So that gave us a lot of insights. So if you want to read it, we published an article in the British Food Journal, and it's called The Alkalized Wine. It was published in 2023. Okay, so what must we do? We know people want wine, de-alkalized wine. We know we are giving it to them, and now we also know what consumers want. So I'm going to show you 2 insights what we suggest. The first one is we now know that consumers regard taste as being important. So many de-alkalized wines have a poor perceived taste because of this whole technique of taking the alcohol out. So what must we do? So this is part of my story where my journey is going. We must do more research on chemistry, we must do research on production and on sensory aspects so that we can improve the taste of wine. And that is actually what I'm trying to do now. So we are actually starting to get involved in a lot of local and international projects where we are going to investigate this and see how can we improve the taste of the alkalized wine. On the other hand, we know that consumers want value for money, and it was the second most important attribute that consumers noted. They said price is important for us, but if we look at de-alkalized wines, many of these wines are expensive. And one of the reasons for this is because we have to do this extra process. So first I need to make wine, then I need to take alcohol out, and then I need to sell it to the consumer. So there's an extra step, and that costs money. So therefore, the production of de-alkalized wine is an expensive process. So what do we need to do? We need to develop more effective production methods and maybe increase education as well. I need to tell consumers, you are paying a lot of money for that de-alkalized wine. It tastes well because I had to do this and this and that to get the product to there. Because I think a lot of people think de-alkalized wine is grape juice. It never was a wine. It's not true. It used to be a wine, and I had to take the ethanol or the alcohol up. So last slide, what do we suggest? We say there is a need for de-alkalized wine. There are offerings, but it is not perfect at the moment. So what we need to do, my work and my story, where I'm going, is I need to do a lot more work, and the industry has to do a lot of work to capitalize on the global market of sobriety in the market for dealcoholized wines. And that is my story. Thank you very much for listening to me.